Within a matter of a week, my health, my job security, and my family was on the line. Hi friends, welcome to my channel where I talk about how to live mindfully for a happier and more peaceful life. Today I want to try a different format, just chat, sit down and talk about mindfulness and help you through some of the tougher times that you may be facing. As you can see, I'm quite new to YouTube myself, so if you've had the chance to watch any of my other videos, they were a little more formal in terms of sharing some of my experiences, my life lessons and insights along the way. But today I kind of wanted to get a little more personal and kind of share some of my experiences throughout this year as I was going through a tough time myself as well, and hopefully offer you some encouragement along the way. So let me know what you think about this format. I'll love to hear from you and see if this is something that is helping people. So I wanted to talk about this topic because I was going through a tough time myself earlier this year. And so when I started 2022, I was kind of in a very hopeful position in terms of I stopped my blog in 2021, which if you're new, I used to be a fashion influencer and I had a genderless fashion blog that in its own right a little prolific, I had an audience. And so for me, 2022 was really that opportunity for me to start anew and feel like I don't need to just attach my identity and my own life ahead just to fashion. And so I was really looking forward to what the prospects had to offer and just trying something different and just kind of embracing uncertainty and seeing what life has to offer for me. So I was lucky enough to find a new job in March that was very much in the tangents of fashion and retail, but in the tech industry. So in some ways it was really the best of both worlds, where it can step one foot into a new industry and also still bring in my expertise from fashion. And so was really feeling hopeful, feeling good about what was to come. But as they say, life just has its own way and its own plans for you, and I guess you can say that's what happened for me. So just a month or two into the job, I got COVID, which in itself is fine, tons of people got COVID. But towards the end of my recovery, I was really starting to freak out a little because every time I went for a walk, I would get nauseous and feel like I was just going to faint on the spot. And on top of that, some of my friends who also had kind of similar experiences were telling me that it took them a month or two before they actually got back to normal levels. And so I was just starting to feel a little uneasy and not at peace with myself, because I was thinking, will this ever end? And am I going to be stuck in this perpetual cycle where I'm just going to be forever nauseous and not be able to do anything? And in the same week, the company that I actually just started working for actually announced layoffs. And so, as a boy who worked in fashion and retail when, the old school media and department store business was kind of, had their days. I've already been through 4 rounds of layoffs, but this layoff was handled particularly not as clear cut, let's just put it that way. And so we were left hanging about our job security for 48 hours, which I did not love. So throughout that 48 hours, I was obviously panicking, and it didn't help that I wasn't feeling great. I just started in the new job. I felt like I tried so hard to get into a new path and find a new industry to work in. And so we're just really freaking out in terms of well, I don't have my health and I don't have my career ahead of me. What is everything going to look like? I was just feeling really panicked in terms of not knowing what was to come and feeling like I tried so hard, but at the end of the day, all my efforts are going away and that so many things are currently beyond me. And so if you think that wasn't enough, on the same week, my dad actually gave me a phone call and told me that my mom was hospitalized. So, it's technically not super new news for us because my mom has been sick for a while, but it was just kind of funny, and kind of tragic in terms of the timing itself. So within a matter of a week, my health, my job security, and my family was on the line. And so at that moment, I just really did not feel like I could see an end to it. It felt like everything I was building up to, and all the mental health, all the peace, all the sense of spirituality I was building up towards that point just kind of started feeling like they were crumbling down. And I was really expecting myself to just fall apart and feel like I could not cope with another day. But actually, through being honest with myself and being vulnerable and being able to really dig into how I was feeling and why I was feeling a certain way, I was actually able to get through the times pretty okay. Yes, I did cry a lot. I felt like I flooded probably my apartment like Niagara Falls who. But within a week or two, I was able to eventually gain my ground again and operate at my more or less normal level. And so I really wanted to share some of the guiding principles that really helped me throughout this time, and hope that, they can bring some solace and some comfort for you, and also just give you some courage throughout the way, so you know that you're not alone, and that there are people who are out there like you also going through a tough time, and that you can get through this. The first comforting and encouraging mindset that really helped me throughout this time was reminding myself that really nothing lasts forever, including this tough time. So I think sometimes when you're going through a tough time, it feels like there really is just no end of the tunnel, and that, everything is falling apart, and that there really is no end to it. And I think a lot of times we use kind of the nothing lasts forever kind of mindset when we apply them to happy things. So like, happiness doesn't last forever, so cherish it while you can, or those kind of sayings. But I think nothing lasts forever in its flipped sense is just as encouraging when you view it from how even a tough time will not last. So I think, one of the easiest ways to think about it is that our emotions come and go. So obviously, sometimes we might go through periods when we are feeling more sad or angry or disappointed for a prolonged period. But that, being stuck in that mindset or being stuck in that emotion is not something that will be forever. Like, you'll always have those moments in between that you will laugh, or you'll still be able to be at peace or resting. And what really reminded me of this lesson when I was going through this tough time was the Buddha's teaching on impermanence. That basically things are always in flux, and that things are always changing. And, when you're going through a tough time, you obviously have every right to feel what you need to feel. But that sometimes, when we're deep into it, we're kind of in a very micro mindset about what we're feeling and what we're going through. But the teaching of the permanence just really reminds you that, there's weeks and there's also months and years ahead of you. And that, no matter how tough it is, this is not something that will last forever. And that eventually it will pass and it will get easier. You will get used to the new circumstances in which you're experiencing. And I kind of like to think about this in terms of, the seasons changing too. So, currently it's fall, sweater weather, pumpkin spice latte season, I know. And, the leaves are starting to turn orange, and that's really the trees conserving their energy. So, the leaves obviously perform a lot of work, and they do bring in energy, but they also are work for the trees to cling onto. And so, as part of that shedding, they fall down so they can make space down the road for new leaves to grow out. And that's what makes spring so beautiful. So, our emotions and our hardships in that way are just like the trees, like they will come and go. And at some point, we will be able to let go of that emotion. We will be able to let go of that hardship, and new experiences and new joys and new happiness will be able to come into our lives and sprout like the trees, like they do during the springtime. And the second thing that really helped me was to feel it hard and let it go. So I think, sometimes we want to put up a face and put up a front for others and show that we're doing well. And I think it doesn't help that with social media, we always want to show our best lives and, in turn hide some of our emotions and some of the hardships that we're going through. But what really helped me was giving myself permission to feel. So I definitely cried a lot, I ranted a lot, and, just felt like I was in this endless loop of emotions and never feeling like there was an end to it. And it's hard because, some of us don't necessarily have the emotional support system, whether that's friends, whether that's family or a community to rely on. So we turn to ourselves, turn to our inner cheerleaders to get through the tough times. And that cheerleader definitely has its best interest for us, but a lot of times it could look like always trying to find the bright side of things, or trying to think of a positive mindset so we can get through the time and show up another day and feel like everything is okay. But when we let that cheerleader also kind of get in the way of giving ourselves permission to feel, then in that sense we're also not giving ourselves that space to also feel the things that we need and then get through them and process them. And despite all the narrative of my inner cheerleader telling myself, no, you'll be fine, you can get through this, you've been through harder times, like those kind of things, it was also really just important for me to feel and to acknowledge that, no, this is how I feel right now, and this is how I feel like I need to process my emotions currently, and that means feeling sad and feeling angry and feeling a little betrayed in terms of what was happening in my life. And, letting myself cry, letting myself rant to my friends constantly was my way of processing and making space so that, I don't always have these emotions carry forward and always weigh down on me. I think when you're emotionally blocking yourself and not letting yourself acknowledge and be honest with how you're truly feeling, those things will always carry forward, and they will always become something that is beneath the surface, like kind of the pulse that you can't really put a name and flavor to it, but are really holding you back from really fully experiencing the joys and the happiness that comes afterwards when you're not being sad and when you're not being angry. We don't need to always have a solution or be positive, as they say, because a lot of times if that positivity is coming from just a sense of should, or I should be happy, that kind of imposition of that I should feel this way is actually not true to you, and it's not honoring yourself that experience of feeling things to the full extent that you are feeling them, and that when you're really able to feel your emotions really hard, really for what they are, that's when things feel better. Like when you think about how a lot of times after a good cry, you just feel relieved. You feel relieved that you're able to let yourself feel, and you're relieved that you got those emotions out into this world. You no longer need to hold onto this energy that's really blocking you, and hold onto that sense of vulnerability that you feel like you can't show the world because you're not giving yourself the permission to feel. So feel hard, let yourself cry, let yourself be angry, and then afterwards you can thank them and acknowledge that they were helping you, that part of being sad and part of being angry is actually part of being your inner cheerleader. And your inner cheerleader may actually not always be so cheerful, and sometimes cheering yourself means letting yourself feel down and letting yourself feel like you're really in the depths of the despair and in the depths of the anger, so that afterwards, when you're in the mindset, when you have processed those emotions, then you can actually resume that positivity and let yourself feel the joy and the boundless happiness that can come afterwards. And the third thing that really helped me throughout this tough time was also knowing that I was giving myself permission to feel joy and happiness. I think a lot of times when you're going through something tough, it's easy to feel like you have a sense of duty and responsibility to be in the depth of the emotions that we just talked about. Like you need to be sad, or you need to feel a certain way, because that's just how the common narrative is regarding, potentially losing a job or feeling sick, or potentially even the idea of losing someone. But I think a lot of times when, as I talked about earlier, being able to let yourself feel hard also means that you're able to let go of your emotions. So in between the times, when the emotions do arise and when some of the tougher emotions do come back to you, there are breaks and there are rests that you will allow yourself to feel the joy and the happiness that does come through. Like I was actually really quite surprised, during that time when I would just go for walks, when I would read, and when I would just laugh at my friends' jokes and kind of feel like really lighthearted and actually feel like things were going to be okay. And part of it was letting myself be open and honest with what I was feeling in a given time, and not letting that emotional narrative of that tough time override every single second of my life. And oftentimes I think because there's so many social norms regarding how we should feel given a certain time, which is just kind of chaotic and kind of crazy when you think about how everyone's individual experience is so different, we tend to feel guilty and we tend to feel shameful when we're like not acting a certain way in a given situation. So, for example, like laughing at a funeral, or like things that seem out of place. And I think we have taken on that sense of duty and responsibility towards ourselves even during the tough time, and that we can only stick to those set of emotions that are more appropriate given your circumstances. And part of sticking to that narrative of how you should feel is also a very linear way of approaching your own life circumstances. As I mentioned earlier, with that things do pass and that emotions is part of it, letting yourself feel that joy and happiness is not incongruent with feeling sad and angry during a tough time. Joys and happiness and excitement and laughter can all coexist the same time with the sadness and the anger and the jealousy and the disappointments. Like they can become so interwoven that sometimes you might feel a little chaotic and feel a little crazy. And I certainly felt a little crazy sometimes too, when I was crying really hard one second and the next moment I'm laughing and having a really good time and just kind of feeling confused as to why I'm feeling this way, and it's because I've let myself feel hard and also let myself have permission to be happy. We don't need to bind ourselves only to one set of emotions during a tough time in our life. Being human is complicated and confusing, and even science and psychology and all of these more scientific approaches to studying the brain have disclosed that there really is just so much we don't know. And that's really what it means to be human, to not let ourselves limit the breadth of how we feel, and imposing only a certain set of shoulds and should nots in a given circumstance, and bind ourselves and feel like we have a duty to that emotion when we actually don't feel like it. So if it's appropriate, let yourself feel happy, let yourself feel the joy and feel the excitement that comes naturally. A lot of tough times we feel like we need to cling on to that sadness, we need to cling on to the anger. But if we let ourselves feel as we need to, then we are able to notice that a lot of those downtimes also entails being okay, feeling bored, and even feeling happy. And the fourth guiding principle that really helped me through my tough time is just really to take it day by day. I think when we're in the weeds of a tough time or during hardships, it's natural for us to want to look forward to and find some sort of hope or some sort of event that we can look forward to. And it's very normal and ingrained in our cheerleader to kind of want to look forward to and have some sort of meaning and hope and joy that they can cling on to. But sometimes when there is a lot going on, and part of being able to honor yourself, the feelings of what you're feeling, is also acknowledging that you don't know what's going to happen, and at this given moment you don't know whether things will work out. And fixating yourself on hope and on the future when it's obviously very unclear of what will play out is actually letting you down. I think in retrospect, yes, looking above and beyond also gets us out of our pigeonhole mindsets in terms of the tough times. But I think sometimes also knowing when to take a step back and acknowledge that you're trying your best on a day-to-day basis is all that is, and that's all that is enough. I think when we feel like we need to be positive, or when we feel like the future will always just be bright and happy and will work out for us, then that puts a lot of pressure on ourselves to feel like we need to do so much to cheer ourselves up and put ourselves back into a good mood so we can get that steam going. But again, when we don't let ourselves process our emotions and let ourselves feel, then we're getting ahead of ourselves when we're trying to plan for a future that we can't even work on in the current moment. I think we sometimes think of day by day as a very low bar kind of expectation for ourselves, when as a society we only tend to want to look forward to things in the long term and find like there's things that we can look forward to. But one of the most empowering thoughts that really helped me through is knowing that day by day is the groundwork and the foundation for the future. I think it's easy to forget that, the future is a direct play on what we do on a day-to-day basis. You won't be able to have a great future or a bright future ahead of you if you're not willing to be honest and willing to let yourself feel on a day-to-day basis. When all the shock and the disappointment and the sadness hit me, I was constantly reminded that, letting myself be sad and letting myself feel the joys in between the cry breaks is actually being mindful of my future. And that even though I'm not necessarily planning for a brighter or happier future, doing the groundwork now is all the foundations and the building blocks towards that future that I'm actively propelling myself forward to already. And I think on the topic of future, what makes taking day by day so much harder is that we were brought up to think about our dreams and our aspirations and our futures and what could happen and what should happen, that we forget that actually the future is based on the now, the present day, and that the future isn't real yet. And that, part of building in the future is paying attention to your now and letting yourself feel, whether that's the sadness or the joys in between the cry breaks. And, taking it day by day is just a much kinder approach. And it's very much the same thing as working towards that bright future ahead of you that you always think about. And it's really taking the first step and letting yourself crawl before you can walk and before you can jog or before you can start sprinting again. And the final reminder that I really wanted to end this video with is that you are enough as is. I think part of any tough period we're going through in our life, there's always the expectations that we need to be working towards something and that we should be fixing everything right now, working on our emotions right now so we can get to that better state. But working with uncertainty, working with your emotions, and working with the suffering that is happening on in you is already a lot of work. And the last thing you want to do is actually beat yourself down into thinking that you are not enough and that you are not doing enough to get yourself out of this tough time. Like, yes, basic things like throwing out trash, doing your dishes, and your day-to-day obligations are still things that you should tend to. But during those downtimes when you're present for yourself, present for your emotions, being yourself is already enough. You know, in the initial days of my tough period earlier this year, I kept finding myself in that forced positivity and wanting to work things out and making things happen, but actually finding myself really let down by that. We don't always need to be striving towards the next thing, the next goal, if being present for ourselves means that's the most important thing in the current moment. And one of my favorite quotes from Zen master Suzuki Roshi simply says that sometimes to be just alive is enough. Being human sometimes means that there is a lot of weight that in a given moment we don't think we can deal with. And sometimes that's okay. And that's also the beauty of just being alive, just simply being, and simply being in the state of not needing to always push ourselves to find that positivity, to find that next thing so we can work on bettering that future. You know, during the tough time between letting myself feel hard and letting go and letting the joys come through made things feel okay. But that didn't also detract from how tough of the time it actually was. And you know, reminding myself that being here and being present for myself is already enough. And that sometimes between the emotional work that I'm doing for myself, that letting myself sit and letting the toughness marinate and just be in my life is also simply okay. And that I will get back to it later, but I don't need to rush into it. Because again, being alive sometimes is perfectly already more than enough. So remember that you are enough already as is, and that any day that you do make through is already another one that is worthy for you to live through. I hope you have found some comfort and encouragement through my story, as well as the guiding principles that really helped me guide through those tough times earlier this year. Let me know what you think of this new format, and just one final kind reminder that you really are enough as is. And whether or not you think you can get through this tough time, that I really have faith in you and that you really do got this. Till next time.